Welcome to the Women in Publishing Summit. This is a fantastic opportunity if you are either in the process of writing a book, thinking about writing a book, or if you've actually gone through all of that part and you are now selling your book and looking for help to sell it better, to market yourself better, to grow your author business, to grow things around your business, etc. We are going to be talking all about money today. I'm Alexa Bigwarf, by the way, your host of the Women in Publishing Summit and owner of Write, Publish, Sell, a service that helps people who want to publish books through all the things to reduce the overwhelm. Today we are talking with a friend of mine and very important person in all of our lives, someone who understands taxes. So Melissa Whaley is a virtual tax advisor for creative business owners, aka author entrepreneurs. She helps demystify taxes for people who light up over their work and freak out over their numbers. Anyone? She's a California native, married to her college sweetheart for 10 years, and they have 4 kids. Yes, 4 kids. You can find her chugging iced tea while geeking out over all things tax. So Melissa's going to help us maybe not demystify, because some of you may come out just as mystified as you were at the beginning on this whole concept of taxes and how you work your book numbers and all this kind of stuff. But she's going to help us answer some questions and learn some information. And the good news is, if we get to the end of this and you're still like, oh crap, I'm not doing any of this right and I need help, Melissa will be there for you. So
I will.
thank you so much for being a part of this. I can't even tell you, well, first of all, I don't want to admit it, but I often just do my head in the sand and ignore the tax stuff and just hope I'll be able to figure it out when I'm plugging in the numbers, right? But that's not really the smart or efficient way to do it. But I get asked questions all the time about, in particular, like how you work all the tax information around selling your book. I know with the tax laws changing, even as small author entrepreneurs, there's some different things that we can claim as business expenses. And especially for the women that I work with, and for all women who are in the writing business, I just really want them to understand that they are in fact a business owner if they haven't been thinking of writing and selling books as being a business owner, and that there are a lot of things they have to be keeping track of for when it comes time to report those numbers. So it's going to be difficult to talk about everything that we need to talk about in 45 minutes or less. So I want to I want to stop talking and let you talk for a little while, and just first of all kind of give us the big picture of the types of things that we should definitely be keeping track of, and how to make our life easier when it comes time to doing taxes as a small creative business owner who sells books as our products.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you guys. And this is, it's one of those topics that we all want to pretend doesn't exist. And at the same time, we're like, we got to do this. We got to do this. So this is just awesome. I think when we're talking about taxes specifically for authors and those who want to publish and sell books, we have to remember that you guys are facing 2 different kinds of taxes that really affect your business, and we don't want to get those 2 confused. So the first one is income taxes, and that affects everyone who earns money, period, and especially those who are seeking to have a business in the writing and selling of books. So that's income taxes. That's your normal annual tax return that you're filing, and you may file it with a spouse, or you may be single, or you may have kids, all those things. That's your primary tax. And then because we are selling books, and they are both physical and digital sometimes, and we're selling them online and we're selling them in person, depending on what you're doing, there is the sales tax issue. And that is a huge thing going on. In 2018, there was a massive disruption to this world of sales tax. And there was a court case that had been in effect for a long time, and called the Quill case, and that got completely overturned with a new court case called the Wayfair case. So it was Wayfair versus South Dakota, if you want to Google that and be bored out of your mind. But
Somebody will want to.
I know, for us research nerds, I mean, like, Google is my BFF. So, but the sales tax issue now is kind of like Pandora's box has opened. So we will talk about just the surface today, because again, like, I don't want to overwhelm you guys.
Yeah.
And there's just so much that has changed that's an area where if you're confused and you really want some guidance, there are some really cool software tool companies that help with that. And there are some different accountancy firms that specialize in sales tax. So I'm definitely going to make sure that Alexa has all the links and stuff for that when we are done, so those can go along with that. I just my echo.
This happens so much to me. Amazon,
I forgot to mute
tell you what. Thank you so much.
Yep. My husband, we actually changed his. He was so excited that he could wake up his Amazon Echo to computer, because he's a Star Trek nerd. And he's been waiting forever for that. Anyways, side note.
On a total side note, I just actually ordered my first Amazon Echoes to put throughout our house. And my children are so disappointed that I changed the names to Echo Dots, because I was like, you are not commanding around an Alexa all day. Plus, the thing would be going bonkers. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and it hears its name randomly. Anyways, so yeah.
Yes.
So those are the two kinds of taxes that you guys are going to face. And I think the first thing to talk about with income taxes is that if you're writing and selling books and your intent is to make this a profitable venture, right? Like, your goal is, I'm actually writing this book because I want to sell it and I want to make money, then you're in business. And there is another side where maybe you wrote a book as a passion project and this is the only book you're ever going to write and publish, and it was a one-time thing, and you're just like, I just want to get my, story out there. Then you may not actually have a business. You may just have written a book as a hobby. So there's this difference between hobby and business income. And it's okay if you decided to write a book one time and it's a hobby, but the rules that apply to you if you had a hobby book publishing versus you're in the business of writing and publishing books, or writing and publishing books is an arm of income for your overall business. Because a lot of us have other income sources in our business.
I would say that's probably where the majority of our audience lies. If you'd like to keep it more simple, just for the purpose, is I think we have a lot of women here who are entrepreneurs who are writing books to grow their businesses. So their book income may actually be kind of small, but it's still a stream of revenue that generates more, it's a thing to help them grow their business. I know we do have some fiction writers who are on the side of, they are writing for an income. I don't know how much we have in the hobby area, just based on, I haven't done any surveys yet, but just based on who I know attended last year. Hobby, we can say if they're a hobbyist, they can contact you later.
Yeah. if you're worried that you're falling into the hobby category, just reach out and we'll kind of break that down for you. But like you said, Alexa, the majority of you are in the business of either writing and publishing books, or having a book is a part of your overall business, and possibly, marketing, getting your message out there for your business. So now there's then like all the things of business taxes. So it is, a lot of people get worried when they're like, well, I have this consulting business, I'm a coach, but I also wrote this book. And are those two separate businesses? And do I need to file separate forms? And do I need to have separate business names? And no, it's all just different revenue streams for your same business. Unless you run a life coaching business and you're writing books about hobby farming, then you're totally fine in those, as long as your general content is of the same nature, then it's all one business. It's just different income streams, right? There's going to be people that pay you for services and people that buy your book.
Okay.
So that's where, that goes. And when it comes to having a business, one of the most important things to realize is that you pay taxes on your profit. So that's your income minus expenses equals your profit. So that's why you'll hear different financial people emphasize, like, what are your expenses, and how, you'll, especially like at the end of the year, a lot of times you'll have people going crazy going, I got to spend money in my business so I can lower my taxes, which is true, but not as true as people often think it is. So
Right.
Yeah. So you're taxed on your profit. And so that's where the whole idea of tax deductions and then tracking your income and expenses comes in, right? Because if we know what our profit is even, we don't know necessarily what it's going to be at the end of the year, but if we're tracking it throughout the year, then that's going to give us a better idea of how that's going to play into our taxes. Because like our tax return at tax time, it's like a crazy puzzle, and we're trying to fit all these pieces together, and everybody has a different puzzle, right? Because somebody may have W-2s and business income. Some people have investments and rentals. And so we're trying to piece all those things together and figure out, like, how much am I going to owe? What am I going to pay in taxes? And so I can tell you now, if you're in business and you know what your profit is, you're going to pay at minimum 15% tax on that business profit. And that's what's called self-employment tax. And this is in addition to your income tax. And it basically is the same as Social Security and Medicare tax. So when you're working a normal day job and getting a pay stub and a W-2, your employer is already withholding these taxes for you, and they're sending it into the government on your behalf. When you become self-employed, all of a sudden now you're the boss and the employee, and everything's like, oh shoot, now I have to deal with this. So they put self-employment tax on your tax return so you can pay your Social Security and Medicare taxes every year when you file. And that way you don't get to the end of your life and then have nothing paid into Social Security to draw off of, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's like, oh man, this tax. I'm like, well, but it's a good thing, because eventually we might use it, or at least we're funding our parents and grandparents and their Social Security draws. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So that is the kind of, oftentimes the bigger tax that people pay is self-employment tax. Oftentimes they will pay more in self-employment tax than they will in regular income tax, because our regular income tax is based on all the income combined on your tax return. So again, if you have both a business and a W-2 job, or maybe you have a spouse that has another job, or you have other income sources, all those get combined together to figure out what your income tax bracket is. And so it's complicated, and I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but that's where you think about when you hear the phrase like tax brackets. Right. Oh, I'm in the 15% tax bracket, I'm in the 20% tax bracket. And those shifted with some new tax laws at the end of 2017 and 2018. So they've actually shifted in our favor.
Oh, good.
Which is nice. Yeah. So our taxes went down starting with 2018 when it comes to, what your tax bracket you're going to fall into most likely. Awesome. So how income tax works is, it's tiered. It's not like, oh, I'm in the 20% tax bracket, this is my income and I pay 20%. It's like a pyramid, the base layer, you pay this tax bracket on that much income, and then it gets layered up and up. So I'm not even going to try to confuse you guys with
We don't need to go there.
No, but just know you're paying income tax, and that's going to be with all the income, not just your business income.
So when it comes to determining what expenses are, what are the types of things that small business owners, authors, those types of people, us people, what should we be keeping as expenses? Does everything qualify as an expense? Like anytime I spend money that has anything to do with my business?
Generally, yes. But sometimes it's it's being able to justify it as, you know, was this actually just for business? So the kind of the buzz phrase that we use is it ordinary and necessary? And
Uh-huh.
so, you know, you think about it completely varies by industry, right? Because obviously a makeup artist gets to deduct buying a bunch of makeup, but basically anyone else does not get to deduct
Right.
buying makeup for themselves because they need to look good on camera. I wish it were true, but you know, so it does vary by industry. I think some of the key things that are just so basic and we sometimes ignore are the things like our office supplies and our app subscriptions, right? Because we all have the apps that we use that are just key to us running our businesses. And it doesn't have to be writing apps, you know, it's things like our website and our, you know, Google email
Right.
and our project management to keep us on task and those sort of things. And then when we're getting into more confusing things, I know a lot of people are like, well, can I deduct my home office? Like I have a space at home. What does that look like? So the key to deducting a home office is that it needs to be a dedicated and exclusive space. So it doesn't have to be an entire room. That's where, you know, a lot of people get worried. They're like, well, I don't have a whole spare bedroom that is my office. I just have this corner of the living room that I literally only sit at this desk when I'm working. Otherwise, no one touches this space. That can count as a home office. So you just need to actually bust out your measuring tape and measure the square footage of that area. And then when you're filing your taxes, there's a place for you to enter the square footage of your home versus just the square footage of your office. And that's how it does its calculations.
Oh, wow.
If you are doing your own taxes, I would highly recommend just taking what they call the safe harbor, which is $5 square foot. That's just going to make it easier on you and safer. If you're working with a tax professional, then you can actually look at the differences because you can either do this safe harbor, which is you get $5 a square foot, or you can do the actual expense, which is where you add up things like your utilities and your mortgage or your rent and your insurance, you know, homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance, all those things you can add up and then create a deduction there. But it's more complicated and there's a lot of nuance there. So
Yeah.
like I said, definitely want to talk to a tax professional before just diving into that one. But it's definitely an option. And then I know for authors, especially if you are traveling and actually, you know, doing book signings or doing public events where you may be going to a fair or
Mhm.
going to a boutique and you're going to have your book for sale, that'll then opens a whole new thing where you can deduct the travel to that event. So it may be a local event and you're just driving your car. So you want to keep a mileage log of how many miles did I drive and what day and what event it was for. And then those can add up and there's a mileage deduction. It usually ranges between 55 and 57 cents a mile. So, you know, as you're driving, those
Okay.
things add up. And if you're going to a bigger event that may be out of town or across, you know, the country or in a different state, then the travel expenses for flying or taking a train or all that stuff, those are deductible, as well as hotel stay, as long as the core purpose of your trip was for business and that you are, you know, spending your time there for business, then you can deduct that travel. Even if you tack on an extra, you know, day or two that's just for fun, you can still deduct the actual cost of getting there and staying there and then getting back.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a good one. And then obviously, you know, we were talked before we started the recording about the cost of buying your own book to
Right.
sell, right? Because that's a big deal.
Yes, exactly. Or anything associated with the production of the book, because we can spend
Right.
thousands of dollars in cover design and editing and layout
Yeah.
and all of those things, coaching and
Exactly. So any of these investments that you're making into either getting your actual book produced or improving yourself as a writer, right? Because you may have already published a book and then you realize like, I really want to take some classes and get better at writing in this style or this genre, or I want to work with a different, like a copy editor. Maybe your first book, you were like, nope, my husband and my mom are editing it and I'm just throwing it out there. Not that we recommend that, but hey.
It happens a lot.
Yeah. So now you're actually wanting to invest in an editor, or maybe you put it up yourself and now you're saying, no, I want to go through a publisher that helps with self-publishing and I want to, buy those services. All of that is absolutely deductible. Again, these are the core expenses to you producing a income product, right? Like, so you're investing in these sort of things. So it's investing in stuff, it's investing in trips, it's investing in people. All of that is deductible. And sometimes, people get worried of, well, I'm an author and a speaker, but I took a marketing class and that's not, and I'm like, yes, of course that's deductible. Like, just because you're not a marketer doesn't mean
you're marketing yourself. So you're growing your business.
Exactly. Right. I like to say anything that helps you grow and improve as a business owner is going to be deductible. And so that's, very helpful in that realm.
Okay. So a couple of things. I want to first talk about sales tax on books, because that's really important and a big question that people have. And then I want to come back out to talking about like 1099 people and stuff like this, because there's some questions on this that I have for you, because a lot of us will employ either coaches or graphic designers or virtual assistants or all of these other online services that are 1099 employees, and handling that at tax time I think is big. But in case we don't get to that today, I really, really want to talk about the cost of the associated taxes. So people ask a lot of times. So for many self-published authors, or even or authors who are able to purchase their book at cost through their publisher, so they will have their book available to them at whatever price KDP offers it to them, or their publisher offers it to them. So say it's retail at $5. So they are able to purchase the book at $5 a copy. I'm sorry, the retail, let's say, is $16 for math. We'll make it 10 to make math really easy. So it's on sale for $10. Yes, $10 on sale. They purchase it. Their expense per book is $5 per book. But then they are also going to get charged shipping. And if they're purchasing directly from KDP, what used to be CreateSpace, or Ingram Spark, or another, however they're purchasing it, they're likely going to get tax on it as well. So when first of all, all of those are expenses that they can include, right, in their expense report. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they've split, for ease of math, we'll say that they've spent $6 per book now with everything included. And they sell that book at $10 per book. Yeah. Now, do they then also tax the person buying the book? And if they're selling it on their website and it could be sold to anybody in the world, how do you figure tax? And so that's the question, really.
And I'll be honest, with the new tax law changes on sales tax, like this is where the nightmare begins. And there's not easy answers, but I will say, so using the same example, one of the key things is to remember, if you sell your book for $10, then you claim $10 of income, and then you subtract the $6 of expenses that you had to get the book to that person.
Correct.
So a lot of people sometimes go, oh, well, I only made $4, so I'm only going to claim $4 of income. Your job is to claim the full amount that someone paid you and then subtract out your expenses.
Okay.
Sales tax wise, if you are selling through a marketplace like Amazon or, Barnes and Noble or something like that, they're most likely going to take care of the taxes, the sales tax for you.
That's exactly right.
But if you're selling it, in person or on your own website, that's where things get tricky. And as of right now, it's most important to focus on what are the laws for your state where you're located. So, if you're located in South Carolina, then you need to know what are the sales tax rules for South Carolina. Do they tax digital products? Do they tax just physical products? Do they not have sales tax at all? There's 50 different laws for 50 different states, right? So you want to make sure that you get sales tax set up properly for your state first. And that's going to apply to anyone you sell to in your state, which often as we are, getting started, it's our friends and family and closer network that are buying from us first, which sometimes are in our state. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. So you need to register with your state as a seller and get sometimes it's a resale license or a sales tax license. There's different names for it, but that's what you want to get started there.
And just to clarify, this is only if you are handling the physical, like shipping and selling the book from your website, not if you have your Amazon link or your Barnes and Noble link on your website.
If you're handling fulfillment or, like it's a logistic thing where you're still receiving the payment and then paying someone else. Cause I know, sometimes we'll list it somewhere and it's more of a they'll handle the shipping for us, but they're not actually acting as a seller. The same as Amazon acts as the seller when it comes to books.
Right.
Other stuff is a totally different thing, but when it comes to books, they act as the seller. So that makes our lives a little bit easier there. But yeah, so if you're, the one actually shipping it out or having someone that provide the service of shipping it out, then you're in charge of receiving and charging the sales tax and then remitting that to the state. So where the new law has kind of made things really muddy is that it used to be that basically you only had to charge sales tax in states that you had a presence, or they have this fancy word called nexus. So if you had a presence, so, if you live in South Carolina, you ship your books from South Carolina, you have to, charge South Carolina sales tax. If you lived in South Carolina, but you lived on the border and you stored your books in a storage unit in North Carolina, then you would have to charge both South Carolina and North Carolina sales tax to sales to those states. So this is why it's important to use some of these better shopping cart systems on your websites that can handle sales tax and not just try to sell your book with a PayPal button or, this is worth investing in, right? It's worth investing in the tools that are going to help you do this well. The majority of the popular shopping cart systems can handle this. They can do it.
Will you list a couple just for the benefit of
Shopify, WooCommerce, Square Commerce, or the Squarespace, and BigCommerce. Those are a few of the ones that pop off my head. Also, if you're selling through something like Etsy, then they have their own system set up as well. So yeah, so those are the good ones. It's not always done well. Like I said, a PayPal button is not going to do this.
Because you have to know how to embed all of the stuff within it. So before we continue on down this road though, so if an author has self-published their book, they pay sales tax on those. Let's say they order 50 books. They pay the sales tax on those books when they buy them. So in theory, isn't the sales tax portion of buying that book already met?
Yeah, and that's where it just gets messy. And a lot of times the reason that the wholesalers charge you sales tax is because they want to cover themselves. Right. So, they're charging sales tax to you guys, the, self-publishing authors or, the small publishing authors, because they as a wholesaler need to cover themselves. They can't guarantee that you're going to know what you're doing and charge sales tax. And also, you may buy all these to give away. You may not go and sell them, so that's the angle they're coming at. A traditional bookstore, when they're ordering wholesale copies from a publisher or, a distributor, they're not paying sales tax. They're on
Okay.
a proper wholesale license.
Okay.
And so they're exempt from sales tax. So
Okay.
it is a little muddy. The reality of it is that there's probably going to be a bit of overlap on sales tax because you've already paid some of it to the distributor, and then you're going to have to charge it again to the people that are buying your book. But it's safer to charge sales tax on the full amount that you're selling it for rather than the difference between the amount you paid sales tax on and what the people are buying it for.
So let me ask you a question then. When you are, when you're coming down to the end of the year and you're trying to put all of your expenses together, let's say that I'm selling a book that retails at $10 and I'm selling it at an event and I just want people to pay the $10 flat. I can eat the sales tax myself, right? I
Yes,
can just say,
you can.
okay.
Yeah.
So how does that work then? Because this is where it gets really crazy because you have the income and then you have the product sale. So can you go one way or the other? Can you just say it's a product and not worry about income from it and say, this is what I spent to purchase this product. This is what I earned from selling that product and handle your tax that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You can basically, when you're filing your sales tax returns, because the sales tax return is separate from your income tax return. Okay. So it's something that you're going to file typically online with your state. You can break down, and the other thing is if you're paying, you probably paid sales tax, like make sure that you paid sales tax for your state and the state that you're selling it in. Right. So you can kind of break it down into, well, I've already paid sales tax on this much. And so the taxable amount, I sold it for $10, but really the taxable amount is $5 because I paid $5 worth of sales tax already.
I see.
And so then it will add up and figure out what you owe in sales tax.
Oh my gosh, that's really complicated.
I know it is. It's muddy.
Here's what I'm going to say, people. If you are doing heavy sales from your own website or at events, you should talk to, and events are completely different. Like if you purchase the product and you just go to an event, to me, if you're selling your book at an event, back of room, that seems more like an income issue than a sales issue, but it's still a product that.
No, it's still, because as long as you're selling a physical product, we're focusing on sales tax more so applies to the physical products. And of course, like you're selling back of room, you're selling a physical product. If you're in a different state than your home state, you need to double check their rules too. Most states have kind of a couple day window of like, if you're selling a product, if you're at an event for 3 or 4 days, in our state and you sell stuff where you're exempt from sales tax because you're not here long enough to make it worth it. But, but that's in a year, right? So if you do an event in the same state, like say it's a quarterly event, you go every single time to sell your book, then you may be hitting a threshold. So that's why I say like, this is such a huge thing that's going on that it's worth. So one of the resources that I highly, highly recommend is a website and a tool called TaxJar.
TaxJar.
And they are built for e-commerce sellers, and they are a sales tax service basically. So their software connects to your different shopping cart systems. So you could sell on 3 different platforms and connect them all to TaxJar. And TaxJar tracks where, you need to be collecting sales tax. And if you've hit the threshold in another state to begin charging sales tax in that state as well. And they also have levels of service all the way up to that they'll file the sales tax reports for you.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So they're a pretty powerful tool. I recommend them to all of my like product-based businesses as well. So, people who are selling on Amazon or Etsy or, like things other than books as well. So it's a helpful thing.
You may not be allowed to answer this question as a licensed tax advisor, but if you are allowed to answer it, I want to know the answer. And if you're not allowed, I'm totally okay, because the last thing I want to do is get you in trouble. But the reality is, if I've just published my first book this year and I went to one event and I sold 50 copies, do I have to go through all this craziness, or can I just, like, is there, or say I go to one event and I sell 3 copies. I mean, do I really have to get registered as a seller and do all of these things and file sale? Is there a threshold?
Yeah. Well, and it varies by state, but yeah, you may be exempt because you haven't hit the threshold. And so that's where I say, like, it's literally different for every state, because some states have a couple of days. They're saying like, oh yeah, if you're only sold for 3 days, then don't even worry about it. Or if you sold less than a certain dollar amount, less than $600 or less than $400, then you're exempt from sales tax. So it's worth it. TaxJar, their website, has a really great breakdown by state.
Good.
So that's, again, why I say start there, because they're a really awesome resource to kind of get you on the path of research for your own state, just to make sure that you're, staying above board, staying in compliance. Because again, if you're small, the likelihood of you getting a sales tax audit from your state is pretty low.
Right.
But, if this is something that you're growing and looking long-term and saying like, I do like publishing and selling books is going to be an important part of my business, and I want to be able to sell these books physically, whether through your own site or when you do go to events, then it's worth it to get yourself, just registered. Because here's the other thing. You can get yourself all registered. It does not cost anything to get a seller's permit or a resale license, for sales tax. And you may sign up for it and have it already, and then never actually use it and just file zeros,
right?
Or you may go and say, I sold $50 worth of stuff, and they're like, well, that's below the threshold, so you're exempt. So, I even did that for myself. I had a resale license in California, and I literally just never used it, and I filed zeros for a while, and then it basically expired.
Right.
So
right. I guess in some cases it's better to be safe than sorry. I don't know how much those licenses cost. I would guess.
Yeah, they don't cost. It does not cost anything to register.
Good to know.
In most states. I have not come across a state that charges you to set up a resale license.
Okay, great. So in that case, it's definitely better to be safe than sorry, and to not have, an issue down the road and wind up paying. And let me tell you, because I'm just going to go ahead and admit it here, we made a little mistake on our 2016 taxes. And it was absolutely not on purpose. It was just something we were doing our own taxes. We omitted something, not on purpose, but it turns out it was a significant omission. And they found it. We didn't even know about it until we got a very unpleasant bill in the mail from the IRS. And let me just tell you this part, like, we didn't mind paying the money because we owed it and we should have paid it. We just,
lesson learned.
Lesson learned. Exactly. And this is the complication of running your own businesses and even having multiple businesses and doing different things with money and all this stuff. Right. Yeah. What made me angrier than a hornet was the fees and the interest that we had to pay on it, because they charged us interest and fees all the way back to that date and time, like we were criminals. And that the extra money tacked on at the end of it made me so angry. So you don't want to make these kind of mistakes and have to pay for it.
No, it sucks. It totally sucks.
It really, really hurts. And I mean, we're not rolling in the dough. We wound up having to take out a loan to pay the IRS back. And that just made me mad, because I was like, there's billionaires that never even file their taxes. And here we are. So anyway, the side note, the important thing to take away from it is that whether you've sold 10 books or 1,000 books or 10,000 books this year, you are now running your own business. You are selling a product, and you need to make sure that you know the laws in your state on, especially if you're passing through. If you're just, here's the thing, if you're just selling through Amazon or through one of these wholesale sites, they handle all the taxes for you. They will send you your 1099 and you file that information as your taxes, and it's easy peasy.
Yeah, because when you're selling through Amazon, you're just getting royalties. Like,
exactly. And
you're not the seller.
Exactly. So you don't have to mess with any of this stuff. But if you are going to events, if you are selling your book at events, if you are going to if you're running something on your website where you're selling copies of the book on your website or any other way, then you really, really, really need to pay attention to what Melissa has been telling us and to make sure that you're doing all of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just do your research. It's not that time intensive to go and do a little research and just know whether you're doing things right or if you need to make a little tweak to change something.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I wanted to talk to you about 1099 employees, but we are just not going to have enough time to get into that today. So
No
if you're
worries.
up for it, we do, and I will not ask you to do this in April, but we do webinars with this. We will be doing webinars, monthly webinars throughout the year in between the
Awesome.
summits to keep people engaged with content. So I would love to have you back.
Cool. I would love to come back and talk to you guys.
About all this fun stuff.
Yes, I nerd out over it. So you
It's
can pick
awesome.
my brain anytime.
Well, I'm so glad. And please let people know. I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right now, myself included, who's like, okay, I need help figuring this part out. So how do they reach out to you specifically for, well, first of all, please let people know what kind of service. Do you only do consulting or do you do actual filing? And then how can they help? How can they get you?
Yeah, so I do it all in the sense that like you can book just a 90-minute session with me to pick my brain and help me run tax projections for you. I help people set up their bookkeeping systems so that they can actually track their stuff well. And then I absolutely prepare and file taxes year round, but primarily during tax season. So if you want some help and guidance, or you just want to hand everything over to me and not have to deal with filing your own taxes, then I can do that for you. The best place to find out more about working with me is my website, which is just melissawhaley.com. And then the other place that I probably spend the most time is over on Instagram. So you can just follow me at Melissa Whaley. I do a lot of tax tips and fun things on both my feed and my Instagram stories. So yeah, that's where you
That
guys
is
can find
awesome.
me. And if
Thank
you guys,
you.
I do have a really inexpensive tax deduction guide. I know people are just like, I still don't know what I can deduct. So if you go to my website, you can find it under the resources, and there's a tax deduction guide you guys can grab, and it's like $5.99, super cheap.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. This was a little bit confusing, a little bit daunting, but definitely good information.
You got to kind of sit back, take a deep breath, let it soak in, watch the recording again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. All right. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Alexa.